It was the royal reunion 19 months in the making. Prince Harry has met with King Charles at Clarence House.
What if everything we thought we knew about Prince Harry's family was a carefully constructed illusion, waiting for the perfect moment to explode? What if behind the smiles, the staged photographs, and the polished royal appearances, there was a truth so devastating that it could unravel not just a marriage, but the very image of a family already on the brink of collapse? This is not just another royal scandal. This is betrayal woven into bloodlines, secrets buried under gilded ceilings, and revelations powerful enough to shake the monarchy to its core. And at the center of it all is Prince Harry, once the cherished son, now the estranged royal, walking back into Clarence House after 19 months of silence, only to discover that his father, King Charles, had been keeping something locked away. Something no parent should ever have to reveal to their child. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The scene could not have been more dramatic. Harry returning after nearly 2 years of absence. The cameras flashing outside. The world speculating about reconciliation, forgiveness, perhaps even a new chapter for father and son. But inside Clarence House, the truth simmered like a storm. Imagine the tension. A father's eyes heavy with unspoken words, a son bracing for answers he thought he already knew, and a document sealed with the weight of history lying between them. Why now? Why this moment, after so long apart, did Charles finally decide to hand over the documents? And what exactly did those pages reveal that left Harry frozen in disbelief, Meghan furious, and the entire monarchy teetering on the edge? Think about it for a moment. If you discovered that the very foundation of your family, the identity of your children, was being questioned, how would you react? Would you cling to denial, or would you demand answers no matter the cost? The drama here isn't just in the documents themselves. It's in the timing, the intent, and the consequences. Because when secrets are revealed in the House of Windsor, they aren't just family matters. They're global events. They're headlines. They're weapons in the battle for legacy, reputation, and power. Now let's pause for a second. Imagine Meghan Markle, sitting thousands of miles away, perhaps confident in the fortress she has built around her brand, her image, her carefully managed narrative. Imagine her reaction when Harry returns from Clarence House not with reconciliation, but with suspicion, fury, and the kind of doubt that can end marriages in a single night. The Meghan we know doesn't sit quietly when her world is threatened. She fights back, and she fights fiercely. So the question is, what role did she play in this? Did she know? Was she blindsided? Or was she one step ahead, already plotting her next move? It's moments like these that grip audiences because they remind us of something universal. Secrets don't stay buried forever. They surface. They demand confrontation. And when they do, they destroy everything in their path. But let's not forget the irony here. Harry, who spent years speaking publicly about truth, transparency, and breaking free from the shadows of the palace, now finds himself entangled in a truth so personal and so devastating that even he might wish it had remained hidden. Can you see the contradiction? The man who demanded honesty from his family is now crushed beneath the weight of honesty he never expected. And here's another twist. This isn't just about Harry, Meghan, and Charles. This is about Archie and Lilibet, two innocent children whose very existence is now at the center of a storm. Two young lives pulled into a battle over identity, legitimacy, and scandal. What happens to them if the world begins to question who their father really is? What happens when whispers of confidential DNA spread through tabloids, social media, and living rooms across the globe? But we must circle back to that room in Clarence House. Picture it vividly. The dim light, the heavy curtains drawn, the silence that falls when Charles hands Harry a folder he has clearly been holding onto for far too long. What goes through Harry's mind at that instant? Relief that his father is finally speaking? Fear of what's inside? Or the deep, unshakable sense that his life is about to split in two? The life before this moment, and the life after? And that's where the hook tightens. Because Harry didn't just walk into Clarence House for a reunion. He walked into a trap of truth, a carefully chosen moment that would force him to confront questions he never thought he'd have to ask. Was he truly a father? Was Meghan keeping something from him? And most of all, why did Charles wait until now? These are the questions that make this story urgent, explosive, and unforgettable. This is why millions will watch, speculate, and argue. Because this isn't just another chapter in royal drama. It's the kind of story that makes people ask themselves, what would I do if it were me? And so, the stage is set. The documents are in Harry's hands. The truth, or at least the version Charles has chosen to reveal, is finally out. But what Harry does with it, how Meghan reacts to it, and how the monarchy survives it, that's where the real story begins. Because as shocking as this revelation is, it's only the first step in a chain reaction. The reunion was supposed to heal. Instead, it tore open old wounds. And once Harry looked down at those papers, there was no turning back. But here's the chilling part. Those documents didn't just question Harry's children. They questioned the future of the monarchy itself. And once the truth started to leak, there was no stopping the firestorm that followed. And so we end the introduction with a question that lingers like a shadow. If Prince Harry isn't the father of his children, then who is? And why did Charles wait until now to reveal it? Because the answer to that question would not only destroy a marriage, but it would send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, the media, and the entire world. And what came next would change everything, forever. Harry's car slowed as it turned into the gates of Clarence House, the flash of cameras bouncing off the windows like lightning in a storm. It had been 19 long months since he last set foot on royal grounds in London. 19 months of exile, bitterness, interviews, Netflix specials, memoirs, accusations, and silence. And now here he was, stepping once again into the lion's den. But this time, he wasn't just walking into a reunion with his father. He was walking into a confrontation that would alter his life forever. The atmosphere outside was electric. Crowds pressed against barriers, journalists shouted questions, cameras clicked furiously. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why now? Why had Harry returned after so long? Was this finally the long-awaited reconciliation with King Charles? Or was something more sinister lurking behind closed doors? Inside Clarence House, the silence was almost deafening. The contrast couldn't have been sharper, the chaos outside versus the suffocating calm within. Harry's footsteps echoed against polished floors, his heart pounding in his chest as he walked through halls that were both familiar and foreign. Each portrait on the wall seemed to watch him, reminding him of the lineage he once belonged to but now stood apart from. He wasn't just a prodigal son coming home. He was a man on trial, and the judge was his own father. What must have gone through Harry's mind at that moment? Relief? Anxiety? A mix of dread and fragile hope? After all, this was not just about a son visiting a father. This was about a man returning to face the consequences of 19 months of estrangement. Imagine yourself in his shoes, walking into a room knowing that every word, every gesture, every silence could decide whether the bridge you burned could ever be rebuilt, or whether it would collapse forever. And then there was Charles, the king, but also the father. For months, perhaps years, he had carried the burden of documents too explosive to share. He had held them close, waiting for the right moment, if such a moment even existed. Now, as he awaited Harry's arrival, he knew that tonight was the night when truth would collide with blood. The reunion itself was painfully restrained. No embraces, no smiles, just two men standing across from one another with the weight of the crown and the ghosts of the past between them. Small talk was impossible. The air was too heavy. Instead, Charles gestured for Harry to sit, his face carved in stone, his eyes betraying just a flicker of unease. But why this moment? Why reveal something so devastating now, after 19 months of silence? Was it guilt gnawing at Charles? Was it political necessity, with the monarchy under constant scrutiny? Or was it simply the cruel inevitability of truth, truth that refuses to stay hidden forever? As Harry sat down, one thought must have haunted him. Was this meeting a chance for healing, or the beginning of another war? Because in that room, reconciliation hung in the balance. For a fleeting moment, Harry may have imagined that he and his father could talk openly, clear the air, perhaps even find common ground. But those hopes were shattered almost instantly when Charles placed a folder on the table. A folder marked with the kind of royal seal reserved for only the most confidential of documents. Can you imagine the chill that must have run down Harry's spine in that moment? A folder like that doesn't contain apologies or invitations. A folder like that holds secrets, dangerous ones, the kind that can ruin lives and topple dynasties. And here it was, placed before him like a loaded weapon. Outside, the press speculated about a heartwarming reunion. Headlines were already being drafted about father and son finding peace at last. But inside Clarence's house, there was nothing heartwarming. Only silence, tension, and the sharp edge of betrayal waiting to be revealed. Harry stared at the folder. His mind raced. Was this about finances? About security? About Meghan? Or something else entirely? The longer he looked at it, the heavier it seemed. Each second stretched into an eternity. Charles didn't speak at first. He simply watched, as if daring his son to open it. And here's the irony. For years, Harry had accused the royal family of secrecy, of withholding the truth. And now, when the truth was finally laid before him, he hesitated. Because deep down he knew. He knew that once he looked inside, there would be no going back. But he also knew something else. His marriage, his family, his very identity could hinge on the contents of that folder. What would you have done? Would you open it immediately, demanding answers? Or would you push it aside, terrified of the storm it might unleash? This was no longer just about Harry and Charles. This was about the entire monarchy, the Markle brand, the children caught in between, and the millions of people watching from around the world. One folder, one secret, one revelation had the power to change it all. The silence stretched on. Harry's hands trembled as he finally reached for the folder, his knuckles white against the polished table. Charles didn't move, didn't blink. He had waited years for this moment, and now it was here. The clasp clicked open. Harry froze. He could feel the weight of his father's eyes on him, the judgment, the pity, the authority. His heart raced as he peeled back the cover, revealing the first page. And in that instant, the fragile hope of reconciliation shattered like glass. Because inside that folder was not forgiveness, not healing, not the start of a new chapter. It was the beginning of a nightmare. And what Harry saw on those pages would not only destroy his marriage, but would force him to question the very blood that bound him to the crown. But what exactly was inside those documents? And why did Charles choose to reveal them now, at this precise moment? The answer to that question is more shocking than anyone could have imagined, and it would leave Harry devastated, Meghan furious, and the monarchy itself trembling on the brink of collapse. The last time Harry and Charles had truly faced one another, the world was cloaked in mourning. It was the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, a moment meant for unity, reflection, and solemnity. Yet even then, tension hung thick in the air between father and son. The cameras may have captured brief gestures of civility, but behind those rehearsed nods and distant glances, wounds remained raw and festering. For Harry, that day was not only about saying goodbye to his grandmother. It was about standing in the shadows of the very family that had ostracized him, watching as the monarchy carried on without him, as though he were already a ghost. For Charles, newly ascended to the throne, it was about carrying the weight of the crown while dealing with a son who had gone rogue, publishing books, airing grievances, exposing cracks in a family that prided itself on silence. 19 months. That was how long the silence had lasted between them. No calls, no reconciliations, just the occasional cold acknowledgement passed through aides and intermediaries. 19 months during which Harry carved his path in California, trading palace walls for Hollywood lights, tradition for talk shows, the crown for Netflix. And now, after all that time, he was back. But before we dive into Clarence's house and that fateful folder, we must rewind to understand how things came to this boiling point. Because the truth is, reunions like this don't just happen. They're built on years of fractures, betrayals, and choices that can't be undone. Think about it. When was the last time Harry and Charles had a genuine conversation, one not laced with anger or disappointment? Not at the Queen's funeral, certainly. Not at Prince Philip's farewell either. Both times, tension crackled between them like a storm about to erupt. Harry's memoir, Spare, had widened that gulf even further, exposing private arguments and humiliations that no royal father could forgive easily. So why, after nearly 2 years, did Harry suddenly return to Clarence's house? Was it guilt pulling him back? Was it a sense of duty? Or was it curiosity, spurred on by whispers of secrets that even Meghan couldn't shield him from? And on Charles's side, why accept him now? Why open the gates to the prodigal son who had, in so many ways, tried to burn the house down. Was it paternal instinct? A desperate attempt to salvage the fragments of a broken relationship? Or was it strategy, cold and deliberate, designed to serve a purpose Harry didn't yet see? Audience, ask yourself this. How would you feel if your father called you back after nearly 2 years of silence, after all the fights and betrayals? Would you trust his motives? Or would you walk in braced for another ambush? That's exactly what Harry faced. The memory of their last encounter, the harsh words, the silence, the coldness, still burned in his mind. Reconciliation seemed impossible. And yet, he came. He walked back into Clarence's house, perhaps hoping against hope that something had changed, that time had softened the edges of their feud. But Charles was not a man softened by time. He was a man hardened by duty. His crown had only deepened the lines on his face, sharpened the weight of his choices. And as he waited for Harry that night, he wasn't just a father seeking closure. He was a king holding evidence that could unravel everything. Let's pause here, because this is where irony cuts deep. 19 months earlier, at the funeral, Harry had whispered to Meghan that things couldn't possibly get worse. That their distance from the royals was painful, yes, but at least they were free of the palace's secrets. Yet here he was, 19 months later, walking straight into the most devastating secret of all. And here's where the contradiction sharpens. Harry had built his new life on the premise of truth, his truth, as he often put it. The interviews, the documentaries, the memoir, all were his attempts to tell his story without the palace's control. But what happens when the truth isn't yours to tell? What happens when someone else holds the truth, a truth about your children, about your marriage, about your very identity? That's the cruel twist Charles had in store. Because in those 19 months of silence, Charles had prepared. He had gathered, verified, and locked away documents that would shake Harry to his core. And now, on this night, after nearly 2 years apart, he was finally ready to reveal them. But why then? Why not sooner? Was Charles biding his time, waiting for the moment when Harry would have no choice but to listen? Or was there something in recent events, a whisper, a leak, a shift, that forced his hand? The truth is, timing was everything. Charles didn't just want Harry to see the documents. He wanted him to feel their weight, to understand that his decisions, his alliances, his very marriage were now on trial. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about reckoning. Imagine Harry's mindset as he approached Clarence's house that night. The last memory he had of his father was one of cold distance. He may have expected tension, maybe even a confrontation about his book or his interviews. But he couldn't have imagined this. Not a folder, not DNA records, not the kind of revelation that would make him question not only Meghan, but himself. And here's where the cliffhanger tightens. When Charles placed that folder on the table, Harry wasn't just reliving 19 months of silence. He was reliving decades of suspicion, betrayal, and unanswered questions. This wasn't just about their last meeting. It was about every meeting they'd ever had, every silence, every withheld truth. So, 19 months apart, 19 months of silence. And then, in one moment, it all came crashing back. The bitterness of the past, the uncertainty of the present, and the terrifying possibility that the future itself might never be what Harry believed. Because the truth waiting inside that folder was not just about the past. It was about everything Harry thought he knew about his children. And what came next would not just scar his marriage, it would scar his soul. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud, shutting out the chaos of flashing cameras and murmuring crowds. Inside Clarence's house, the atmosphere was suffocating. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it strangles. For a man like Harry, who had spent nearly 2 years away from the royal halls, the weight of that silence pressed down like a physical force. It wasn't the kind of reunion anyone imagined. Outside, the press spun hopeful tales of reconciliation, the estranged son finally returning to mend broken bonds, perhaps even a moment of healing between father and son. But inside, the truth was far darker. Charles had chosen the hour carefully. Late in the evening, long after staff had retreated, long after the world outside had settled into night. This wasn't going to be a warm welcome. This was going to be a reckoning. The room they entered was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight against the world. The fire burned low in the grate, casting shadows across the walls where portraits of past monarchs loomed like silent judges. Every detail felt intentional, as though Charles had curated the stage for this private confrontation. And in the center of it all sat a single object on the polished wooden table, a folder sealed with the unmistakable royal crest. Harry's eyes lingered on it immediately. He didn't need to ask what it was. He could feel it. Whatever was in that folder was not trivial. It wasn't paperwork. It wasn't logistics. It was something meant to change the trajectory of his life. And Charles knew it. He sat in his chair, posture rigid, his expression carved from stone. For a moment, neither spoke. The crackling of the fire was the only sound, filling the silence that neither dared to break. It wasn't just father and son sitting across from each other. It was a monarch and his heir-turned rebel, staring each other down across a chasm that had widened with every book, every interview, every accusation. Think about it. What would go through your mind in that moment? Your father, a man who has withheld so much from you in the past, now sitting before you with a sealed folder on the table. Do you lean in, desperate for the truth? Or do you recoil, terrified of what that truth could be? Harry's pulse quickened. His hand twitched against his knee. He wanted answers, he always had. But he wasn't prepared for this kind of answer. Charles finally spoke, his voice low, measured, and weary. "It's time," he said, almost as if speaking to himself as much as to Harry. "There are things you need to see. Things I cannot hold from you any longer." Those words cut through Harry like ice. Time. Why now? Why after 19 months of silence? What had changed? The timing made no sense. And yet, deep down, Harry understood. There is no good time for a revelation like this. Only inevitability. The folder sat there, untouched. Neither man reached for it at first. The weight of it filled the room, an invisible presence that made the air hard to breathe. And here's the irony. For years, Harry had painted the monarchy as an institution addicted to secrecy. He had demanded transparency, accused his family of hiding behind walls of silence. And now, when transparency sat right in front of him, he hesitated. Because sometimes the truth you demand isn't the truth you want. The setting itself added to the tension. Clarence House was more than just a residence. It was history incarnate. The very walls had seen decades of royal intrigues, whispered arguments, clandestine deals. And now it was witnessing one of the most intimate betrayals of all. A father revealing to his son that the bloodlines of his family might not be what they seemed. Let's stop and ask. Would you rather live in blissful ignorance, clinging to the comfort of what you think you know? Or would you dare to pull back the curtain, knowing it might destroy everything? That's the exact choice Harry faced, and Charles knew it. The minutes stretched on. Harry shifted in his seat, his eyes fixed on the folder, his chest rising and falling with uneasy breaths. Finally, he broke the silence. "What's in there?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Charles didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at Harry, his face grave, his silence almost more terrifying than words. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he said, "The truth." 2 words. Simple, yet devastating. Harry's throat tightened. The truth? About what? His mind spun through possibilities, financial audits, royal cover-ups, even more media scandals. But no, something about the way Charles said it told him this was personal, deeply personal. The fire crackled. Outside, the city of London slept, unaware that inside Clarence House, a bomb was about to detonate. Harry reached for the folder. His hand hovered over it, trembling slightly, before pulling back. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, he looked at Charles, searching his father's face for any sign of reassurance. But Charles gave none. His expression was that of a man carrying a burden too heavy for words, one he could only pass on in writing. This wasn't a conversation. This was a sentence being delivered. And the cruelest part? Harry knew that once he opened that folder, there was no return. He couldn't unsee what was inside. He couldn't unknow the truth. His life would split in two, the life before the folder and the life after. So he waited, caught between fear and curiosity, denial and inevitability. The folder sat between them like a silent predator, waiting to strike. And in that moment, reconciliation was no longer possible. The air that once carried the faint hope of healing now carried only dread. Because this meeting wasn't about mending the bond between father and son. It was about ripping open wounds that could never heal. And when Harry finally opened that folder, what he found inside would not only devastate his marriage, but would ignite a scandal that threatened the monarchy itself. But just as his fingers grazed the edge, Charles leaned forward and said something that made Harry's blood run cold. Harry's fingers trembled as they hovered over the edge of the folder, the royal seal glinting faintly under the dim light. That seal wasn't just wax and paper. It was centuries of tradition, secrecy, and authority. Breaking it meant breaking into a vault of truths that had been guarded with absolute care. And now it lay in front of him, waiting, daring him to open it. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. Harry glanced at his father, searching desperately for some clue, some flicker of emotion that might prepare him for what was inside. But Charles remained still, composed, his face an unreadable mask. It was as though he had rehearsed this moment, bracing himself for the inevitable storm that was about to erupt. What did Charles see as he looked across the table? Did he see his son, the boy he once held, the man who had once called him Pa with warmth? Or did he see the rebellious prince, the runaway duke who had dragged the monarchy into chaos? The answer didn't matter now. Tonight, he was both, and both deserved to know the truth. Harry swallowed hard. His mouth was dry, his heart hammering against his chest. He finally broke the silence. "Why now?" he asked, his voice cracking with the weight of 19 months of anger and confusion. Charles didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, his gaze fixed firmly on Harry. When he finally spoke, his words were deliberate, heavy. "Because the time for silence has passed. The time for silence has passed." 6 words that sounded like a sentence, like a declaration, like the opening of Pandora's box. Harry's mind raced. What could possibly be so urgent, so devastating, that his father would wait nearly 2 years to reveal it? And why cloak it in secrecy, in the ritual of seals and folders? Why not just say it outright? Because words spoken can be denied. Documents, on the other hand, carry a permanence that cannot be erased. He reached for the folder again, his fingertips brushing against the seal. He hesitated, pulling back. "Is this about me?" he asked, almost pleading. Charles's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "It's about more than you. It's about them." Them. The word cut deep. Harry didn't need clarification. Them meant Meghan. Them meant Archie. Them meant Lilibet. His stomach twisted into knots. What could his father possibly have about them? And why did it feel like the ground beneath him was crumbling? He pulled his hand back again, shaking his head. "I don't," he started, but his voice trailed off. The truth was, he didn't want to finish the sentence. He didn't want to admit out loud that he was afraid. Because here was the cruel contradiction. Harry had built his life, his brand, his entire post-royal identity on demanding truth, on exposing lies, on breaking free of palace secrecy. Yet now, when the ultimate truth sat before him, he couldn't bring himself to face it. And Charles knew it. He let the silence linger, watching his son wrestle with the decision, knowing that hesitation would only make the eventual revelation hit harder. The folder sat between them like a ticking bomb. The seal was unbroken, but its power was already detonating in Harry's mind. Think about this for a moment. If you were handed a folder that could either validate your life or shatter it completely, would you open it? Or would you cling to the comfort of not knowing, of living in the illusion you've built for yourself? Harry pressed his palms against the table, trying to steady himself. "I don't want to play games," he said, his tone sharper now, frustration breaking through. "If there's something I need to know, then tell me. Don't sit there with your silence and your seals." But Charles didn't flinch. His calmness was chilling, almost inhuman. He simply gestured toward the folder. "It's all there. And once you see it, there will be no turning back." That was the truth of it. There would be no turning back. Once the seal broke, once the pages turned, Harry's world would never look the same again. And then Charles delivered the final blow. He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Harry's, and said quietly, "You're not the only one who deserves the truth. They do too. Meghan, the children, everyone." Harry's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just about him. This was about his family, his marriage, his children. And if Charles was right, if these documents revealed something about Archie and Lilibet, then his entire life was about to implode. The weight of it all pressed down on him. His chest tightened. His mind screamed at him to walk away, to leave the folder unopened, to preserve what little peace he still had. But another voice whispered in the back of his head, "You demanded the truth. Now it's here. Do you have the courage to face it?" His hand shook as he reached out once more. This time, he didn't pull back. His fingers gripped the seal, and with one sharp motion, he broke it. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. The folder was open. The first page lay before him, and Harry's eyes froze. His world stopped. The words blurred as his brain tried to process them, as his body tried to reject them. His entire identity as a father, a husband, a man of truth, shattered in an instant. Because what those documents claimed was not just shocking. It was unthinkable. But what exactly did they say? And how could Charles possibly have obtained them? The answer to those questions would unravel Harry's life and Meghan's carefully constructed world in ways neither of them could have ever prepared for. And as Harry stared in disbelief, one horrifying thought consumed him. If this is true, then everything I've built is a lie. The first page blurred in Harry's vision, as though his own mind refused to let him absorb the words staring back at him. His hands trembled as he clutched the folder, his breathing shallow and uneven. He blinked once, twice, but the words did not change. They were cold, clinical, and absolute. Confidential DNA analysis. Paternity results. 2 names, Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor, Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor. And beneath them, the line that shattered Harry's soul, probability of biological fatherhood, 0%. Harry's heart stopped. The air seemed to vanish from the room. His throat tightened, as though invisible hands were squeezing the life out of him. The fire crackled in the background, its warmth mocking the icy chill that swept through his veins. He read it again, desperately hoping he had misunderstood. But the words were merciless. According to the documents, the children he had held in his arms, the children he had fought to protect from the world's scrutiny, the children he called his flesh and blood, were not his. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice breaking. "This can't be right." Charles sat motionless, his eyes heavy with the kind of sorrow that only deep truth can carry. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence said it all. Harry's mind spiraled. Flashes of Archie's smile, Lilibet's laugh, Meghan's reassurances, they swirled together into a haze of doubt. Had there been signs? Moments he had brushed aside? The dark hair, the eyes, the whispers in the press about surrogacy, rumors he had always dismissed as cruel lies. Now, staring at the pages in front of him, those whispers clawed back with a vengeance. Where did this come from? Harry demanded, his voice raw, desperate. He slammed the folder shut, as if closing it could erase its contents. Who did this? Who would even? He trailed off, shaking his head violently. No, I don't believe it. Charles finally spoke, his tone calm, almost detached. The tests were commissioned months ago. Independent labs. Verified twice. Harry's eyes widened, fury flaring in him. You had my children tested? His voice cracked between disbelief and rage. Without my knowledge? Without Meghan's? Charles didn't flinch. I had no choice. Too many questions. Too much at stake. At stake. Those 2 words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about Harry's family. This was about the monarchy, the line of succession, the future of the crown. If Archie and Lilibet were not Harry's children, their very place in the royal line would crumble. The institution that had survived wars, scandals, and abdications might not survive this. But for Harry, this wasn't about the crown. It was about his heart, his children, his marriage, his trust. He stood abruptly, pacing the room, his hands pulling at his hair. No, this is madness. Meghan, she would never, she. His words stumbled as doubt gnawed at him. Wouldn't she? Had she kept something from him? Had she lied? And that's when the cruelest thought entered his mind. What if Meghan had known all along? He turned back to Charles, his face pale, his voice trembling. Did you tell her? Charles shook his head slowly. Not yet. This was for you to know first. But she will. Harry's stomach churned. He could already picture the confrontation, the accusations, the denials, the tears, the rage. Meghan, cornered. Meghan, fighting back. Meghan, using every ounce of her charisma to twist the story, to turn him against his father, to paint herself as the victim once again. And then came the second wave of horror. If he wasn't the father, then who was? His eyes snapped back to the folder, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the pages, desperate for answers. Each report confirmed the same devastating result, 0%. His name struck out like a cruel red slash. And then, near the bottom of one of the documents, a section caught his eye. Paternal genetic markers, match with external profile under investigation. Harry froze. External profile. The word slammed into him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a test ruling him out. This was a test pointing toward someone else. Someone whose DNA was already on file. He staggered back, his chest heaving. Who? He demanded, his voice hoarse. Who is it? Tell me. But Charles did not answer. His silence was unbearable, his refusal to speak more damning than any word. And then, in the cruelest twist, Charles leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. That is not for me to say, but the truth will find you. It always does. Harry's blood ran cold. His knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. The room spun. His world spun. Everything he thought he knew, about his children, his wife, his life, was collapsing in real time. But the torment wasn't over. Because the question wasn't just about who the real father was. It was about why Meghan had let this go on. Why she had allowed him to believe. Why she had built a life with him on foundations of deceit. Harry's chest tightened. His breath came in sharp gasps. His mind screamed with betrayal. And yet, through the haze of shock and devastation, a single, burning question rose above all others. If he wasn't their father, then who was? The cliffhanger loomed, a question so dangerous it threatened not just Harry's marriage but the future of the monarchy itself. And what Harry would discover about that answer would leave him shattered beyond repair. Harry slumped back into his chair, the folder still open before him, the damning words staring up at him like a cruel joke written in ink. His chest heaved as though the weight of the entire monarchy had landed on his shoulders. And in many ways, it had. But why? Why now? Why would Charles, his father, the king, choose this exact moment to hand him documents that would devastate his life, his marriage, and his already fragile place in the world? The question gnawed at him. Charles could have stayed silent. He could have taken these documents to his grave, as so many royal secrets had been buried before. Instead, he had summoned Harry back after 19 months of estrangement, only to rip open wounds that would never heal. So why? The answer was chilling in its simplicity, because silence was no longer an option. For Charles, this wasn't just about Harry and Meghan. It was about the monarchy itself, about survival, about succession. The House of Windsor had weathered countless scandals before, abdications, affairs, divorces, but nothing like this. Questions of paternity weren't just tabloid fodder. They struck at the very heart of royal legitimacy. If Archie and Lilibet weren't Harry's children, then their place in the line of succession was invalid. And if that truth leaked, the monarchy could collapse under the weight of doubt and scandal. Charles wasn't simply a father revealing a devastating truth to his son. He was a king defending an institution older than the nation itself. But for Harry, the irony was suffocating. For years, he had built his new life on exposing secrets, his memoir, his interviews, his documentaries. He had demanded transparency from his family, mocked their obsession with silence. And now, when faced with the raw, unfiltered truth, he wished for nothing more than ignorance. He had wanted honesty. Now honesty was tearing him apart. Imagine the contradiction. A man who had screamed about the importance of truth now begging for the comfort of lies. It was almost poetic, almost cruelly inevitable. Harry buried his face in his hands, his voice breaking. Why didn't you tell me before? Charles's reply was cold, almost surgical. Because you weren't ready to hear it. And because the monarchy wasn't ready for the consequences. The monarchy. Always the monarchy. Harry's blood boiled. Even in this moment of personal devastation, his father's words circled back to the crown, to duty, to the survival of the institution. Was this ever really about protecting Harry? Or was it only about protecting the throne? Audience, let me ask you this. If you were Harry, would you see your father's actions as an act of love, finally giving you the truth you deserved? Or would you see it as betrayal, a ruthless move by a king who valued the crown above his own son's heart? The more Harry thought about it, the clearer it became. Charles hadn't revealed the documents for Harry's sake. He had done it for the monarchy, to protect the Windsor name, to prevent an even bigger scandal from erupting. Harry wasn't a son in this equation. He was a liability, a problem to be managed. And here's the twist. Charles wasn't wrong. If these documents ever saw the light of day, they would spark a firestorm the monarchy might never recover from. Imagine the headlines. Imagine the debates in Parliament. Imagine the whispers in every home across Britain and beyond. If Archie and Lilibet aren't Harry's children, then who are they? And what does that mean for the royal line? The monarchy thrives on image, on continuity, on the illusion of unbroken legitimacy. One crack in that illusion, and centuries of tradition crumble. But where did that leave? And worse, he was powerless. If he spoke out, he would be branded a traitor again, the man who brought ruin to the crown. If he stayed silent, he would be complicit in a lie, carrying the unbearable weight of doubt about his own children. Trapped. That was the only word for it. Harry was trapped. Charles watched his son struggle, but he offered no comfort, no reassuring words, no fatherly embrace. He simply said, "You demanded the truth, and now you have it." The cruelty of it was staggering. Harry's mind spun with questions. If the monarchy was at stake, then who else knew? Who else had seen these documents? Were they locked away in vaults? Buried in archives? Or were they already leaking, inching toward the press like a slow, inevitable avalanche? And then the most horrifying thought of all struck him. Meghan. Did Meghan know? Had she known all along? The idea clawed at him, tearing apart every memory, every smile, every whispered word between them. The woman who had sworn she was his partner in truth, his ally against royal secrecy, had she been the one keeping the biggest secret of all? His chest tightened, his vision blurred, his world crumbled. But Charles remained calm, almost detached. For him, the documents weren't about love or betrayal. They were about control, about survival, about ensuring that when history judged him, it would see a king who defended the crown, no matter the cost. And in that chilling clarity, Harry understood something devastating. This wasn't just about whether Archie and Lilibet were his children. It was about whether Harry himself had ever truly mattered to his father, or whether he had only ever been a pawn in service of the monarchy. But the story didn't end here. Because if Harry thought this revelation was the worst of it, he was wrong. The storm was only beginning. And when Meghan finally learned what was in that folder, her reaction would send shockwaves through Clarence house and far beyond. The door slammed so hard that the sound echoed through the California mansion like a thunderclap. Meghan stormed into the room, her face a mask of fury, her eyes flashing with a mixture of rage and fear. Harry, still pale from the flight back from London, stood frozen. The folder, the same one his father had placed in front of him at Clarence house, lay on the table between them. The atmosphere was thick, charged, as though the walls themselves were bracing for the explosion about to erupt. "Tell me this isn't true," Meghan spat, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. She jabbed a finger toward the folder, her hand shaking. "Tell me you didn't actually believe what Charles put in front of you." Harry swallowed hard. His lips parted, but no words came out. He had rehearsed this moment on the flight home, but now that it was here, he couldn't find his voice. Meghan pressed harder, her tone laced with venom. "So after everything, After all the years I've defended you, after all the battles we fought together, you come back here with this? With this?" Harry finally spoke, his voice low and broken. "Meghan, it wasn't just one test. There were multiple. Independent labs. It." "Stop." She raised her hand, silencing him. "You actually sat there and listened to him? After 19 months of silence? You let him manipulate you with a folder full of lies." Harry clenched his fists. "I didn't let him do anything. I saw the results with my own eyes." "And you believe them?" She shot back, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Do you even hear yourself? After everything we've said about them, how they twist narratives, how they use manipulation, you of all people should know better." The words stung, because Meghan wasn't entirely wrong. Harry had always accused his family of deceit, of orchestrating schemes to protect the crown. But this was different. These weren't rumors. These weren't whispers in tabloids. These were documents, stamped and sealed, clinical and cold. "Meghan," Harry said, his voice breaking, "what if it's true?" The room fell silent. Meghan froze, her jaw tightening, her eyes narrowing. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Fear, panic, or perhaps calculation. Then she snapped back, her fury redoubled. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you even think that? After everything I've given up, after everything I've endured, you're standing there questioning me." Harry's shoulders slumped. "I'm not questioning you. I'm questioning everything." Her laughter was bitter, sharp, almost mocking. "Exactly what Charles wanted. To drive a wedge between us. And look at you. You're letting him win." But Harry shook his head, his voice rising. "This isn't about Charles winning. This is about the children. About Archie. About Lilibet. If there's even a chance." Meghan cut him off, her eyes blazing. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Don't you dare reduce me, reduce us, to some science experiment stamped with your father's seal. You think a piece of paper can undo everything we've built? You think it can tell you who you are as a father?" Her words hit hard, yet Harry couldn't shake the images from Clarence House. The clinical lines, the percentages, the cold certainty of science. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a verdict. He whispered, almost to himself, "But what if the verdict is right?" Meghan stepped closer, her face inches from his. "Then you choose," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You choose whether you believe your wife, the mother of your children, or you believe a man who has spent your entire life using you as a pawn." It was a cruel dilemma. Believe the wife who had stood by him through exile, who had promised him truth and loyalty. Or believe his father, the man who had betrayed him so many times, yet now presented evidence that couldn't be ignored. Audience, what would you do? Would you cling to love, even if it meant ignoring the possibility of betrayal? Or would you follow the evidence, even if it meant destroying your marriage? The tension in the room thickened. Meghan's hands balled into fists, her body trembling with barely contained rage. Her voice softened, but her words were edged with steel. "If you go down this road, Harry, if you let them convince you of this lie, then you're not just doubting me. You're destroying us." Harry stared at her, torn apart. Every fiber of him wanted to believe her. To believe that the documents were fabricated, that Charles had orchestrated yet another cruel manipulation. But deep inside, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already growing. Meghan saw it in his eyes, the hesitation, the fracture, the possibility that he no longer fully trusted her. And that realization ignited something dangerous in her. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to plead. She was going to fight. Her voice hardened. "If you think I'm going to sit here while you let him destroy us, you're wrong. You want the truth? Fine. But don't expect me to sit quietly while you let Charles dismantle this family. I will protect myself, and I will protect my children." Harry's heart sank. "What are you saying?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm saying, don't push me into a corner, Harry. Because if you do, you won't like what happens next." The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade, ready to fall. And Harry realized with a sickening jolt that his wife wasn't just furious. She was preparing for war. Because Meghan's next move wouldn't be about saving her marriage. It would be about saving herself. And the phone call she was about to make that night would set into motion a chain of events Harry could never have imagined. The clock ticked past midnight, but Meghan was wide awake. The fight with Harry had left her seething, her pulse racing, her thoughts spinning faster than she could control. Harry had retreated to another room, hunched over in silence, consumed by the folder that had followed him home like a curse. But Meghan wasn't going to sit still and wait for his doubt to devour her world. She paced the living room, phone in hand, her mind already calculating her next move. For Meghan, crises were never just obstacles, they were battlefields. And she knew how to fight. She always had. Her first call was to her mother, Doria Ragland. The line rang once, twice, before a groggy voice answered. Meghan? What's wrong? Meghan didn't waste time. It started, she said flatly. Charles gave Harry something. Documents. He's questioning me. Questioning everything. There was silence on the other end. Then Doria's voice, calm but edged with concern. What kind of documents? DNA tests. Meghan spat, her voice rising. Claims that Harry isn't the father. Can you believe that? After everything. Doria inhaled sharply. And Harry believes it. Meghan clenched her teeth. He wants to. That's the problem. He's letting them get inside his head. 19 months of silence. And his father finally speaks. And this is what he brings? He's breaking Harry piece by piece. And he doesn't even see it. Doria's tone hardened. Then you can't let him control the narrative. You've worked too hard for this, Meghan. You've built too much. Exactly. Meghan had built an empire around her story, her truth. To lose it now, to let Charles dictate the narrative, was unthinkable. She ended the call quickly, her jaw set, her mind already on the next number. Jessica Mulroney, once her closest ally, now more distant but still a confidant when the storm raged too violently. The phone barely rang before Jessica answered. Meg? Jessica's voice was sharp, alert, almost as if she had been waiting for this call. They're coming for me, Meghan said without preamble. Charles gave Harry documents. He's trying to destroy me. Jessica let out a low whistle. And Harry? Meghan's laugh was bitter. He's cracking. He doesn't know what to believe. I can see it in his eyes. He doesn't trust me anymore. Jessica's tone shifted into strategy. Then you do what you've always done. Control the story. Before they can. Leak something first. Twist it. Make yourself the victim before the truth can paint you as the villain. Meghan's pulse quickened. Jessica was right. Meghan had survived by controlling narratives, bending stories, turning the harshest headlines into opportunities. But this wasn't just about reputation. This was about survival. Her third call was the most critical. Tyler Perry. He had once been their savior, offering his mansion as a refuge when the world had turned against them. And Meghan knew he still had the power, the reach, the network to protect her again. Tyler, she said the moment he picked up. It's Meghan. I need your help. There was no hesitation in his voice. What's going on? They're trying to destroy me. Charles has poisoned Harry against me. He gave him documents. False ones, I'm sure of it. But Harry's broken. He's doubting me. If this gets out, if they spin it before I can. Tyler interrupted, his voice calm and steady. Then you move first. You don't wait. You get ahead of the story. Don't let them define you, Meghan. Define yourself. Meghan closed her eyes, relief mingling with resolve. Yes, that was the answer. She couldn't stop the documents from existing, but she could shape the way the world perceived them. She could paint herself as the wronged woman, the target of a cruel royal conspiracy. And Harry? If he wavered, if he hesitated, she would outmaneuver him too. She ended the call, her strategy forming like a storm cloud in her mind. This wasn't just about protecting her marriage anymore. This was about protecting her brand, her empire, her survival. Meanwhile, Harry sat in the guest room, staring at the folder in front of him. His hands trembled as he traced the edges of the papers, his mind replaying every word, every line, every percentage. The silence between him and Meghan was deafening, and yet he could hear the faint hum of her voice in the other room, low and urgent. Who was she talking to? What was she planning? Harry's chest tightened with dread. He wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to the woman who had promised him escape, freedom, love. But doubt gnawed at him, sharper than ever. And here lay the cruel paradox. Meghan was fighting for her survival with every call, every whispered plan. Harry, on the other hand, was paralyzed, drowning in silence, consumed by the truth he could neither deny nor accept. The divide between them had never been greater. She was plotting. He was unraveling. And when Meghan made her final call that night, to a contact whose name Harry would never have expected, the consequences would ignite a firestorm neither of them could control. Because Meghan wasn't just preparing for damage control. She was preparing to strike back. And Harry had no idea how devastating her next move would be. The morning sun broke over California, spilling gold light across the Sussex estate. But inside, darkness reigned. Harry sat slumped at the kitchen table, hollow-eyed, the folder lying unopened yet again in front of him as though taunting him. Sleep had escaped him entirely. Every time he closed his eyes, the words glared back. Probability of biological fatherhood, 0%. But across the ocean, in London, the storm had already begun. The first whispers appeared in a gossip column buried deep in a mid-tier tabloid. A cryptic line, almost easy to miss. Whispers of private tests raising questions about royal bloodlines resurface. It was vague enough to be dismissed as speculation, but sharp-eyed readers recognized the undertones immediately. Within hours, the line was picked up, reprinted, shared on forums, and dissected across social media. By midday, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a roar. Sources close to Clarence House suggest confidential records exist, records that question the legitimacy of Prince Harry's children. Harry's phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from aides, distant friends, even old army mates. At first, he didn't dare look. When he finally did, the headlines were already unavoidable. Royal bombshell. Paternity in question? His heart sank. Someone had leaked it. But who? Was it Meghan, striking first to frame herself as the victim of palace cruelty? Was it Charles, forcing Harry into a corner to control the narrative? Or was it someone else entirely, a shadowy hand within the institution ensuring that the truth, or some version of it, reached the world on their terms? Harry staggered to his feet, phone in hand, anger boiling in his chest. He stormed through the house until he found Meghan in the study, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call the moment he entered, her face unreadable. "You knew," he accused, his voice low and raw. "You knew this would get out." Meghan arched an eyebrow, her tone calm, almost too calm. "Don't look at me, Harry. You think I want the world dissecting my children's parentage? You think I'd invite this circus?" But Harry's eyes narrowed. "Then how is it already in the press? Who benefits from this, Meghan? Who had the motive to leak it?" Her silence was telling. For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed her face. "Audience, let me ask you, what do you think? If you were in Meghan's shoes, accused of orchestrating a leak that could destroy everything, would you deny it outright? Or would you leave just enough ambiguity to keep everyone guessing?" Harry's hands trembled as he scrolled through his phone. Social media was ablaze. Hashtags trending, commentators speculating, even late-night comedians making jabs. The world wasn't waiting for confirmation. The world had already decided something was rotten in the House of Windsor. Meghan stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Don't you see? This is exactly what they want. To pit us against each other. To make you doubt me. To make me look like the manipulator. Charles knew what he was doing when he gave you that folder. And now it's happening." Harry's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her. But the timing was too perfect. The leak had appeared less than 24 hours after she had spent the night on the phone, whispering into calls he wasn't privy to. And now here it was, out in the world. Was it Jessica? Was it Tyler? Was it your mother? Harry's voice cracked as he listed the names. "Who did you call last night?" Meghan's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare." The tension between them was unbearable. On one side, Harry drowning in suspicion, convinced that someone close had betrayed him. On the other, Meghan standing her ground, refusing to admit anything, wielding her defiance like armor. But outside their walls, the leak was spreading like wildfire. News anchors debated the implications. Parliament members murmured about constitutional crises. Commentators openly asked whether Archie and Lilibet should remain in the line of succession. The monarchy itself was now at the center of a global scandal. And in the midst of it all, one question remained unanswered. Who leaked the documents? Theories multiplied. Some swore it was Meghan, desperate to seize control of the story. Others insisted it was Charles, tightening his grip on the crown by preemptively sacrificing Harry. Still others whispered of palace insiders, courtiers who had grown tired of Harry's rebellion and saw this as the perfect way to cut him down permanently. Harry's mind was unraveling. He could no longer tell friend from foe, truth from manipulation. All he knew was that his world was collapsing, and he had no control over the narrative anymore. But the cruelest twist? The leak hadn't revealed everything. The most explosive part of the documents, the section suggesting another man's DNA profile, hadn't surfaced yet. Not publicly. Not yet. And when that detail finally broke, it would send shockwaves through the monarchy that no one, not Charles, not Harry, not Meghan, could contain. Because the world wasn't just asking if Harry was the father. It was about to start asking who was.